before I get started on what I'm going to talk about here on creating enduring connections, let me just get you in the right frame of mind of what we want to talk about today. And I want to start off by asking you a question. And the question is this, just by a show of hands, how many of you would be happy if everything went right? Quality of service, reliability, responsiveness, how you get along with others. If everything went right, let's say 90% of the time, just by a show of hands, 90%. How about 95? How about 97? There's less for 97. Okay. Well, you know, there are some companies that have a 99.9% success rate. For example, Federal Express, 99.9% on-time delivery. Motorola has even a better success rate than that. So I assume everybody here would be happy if everything went right 99.9, only 1/10 of 1% off. Everybody pretty much for that? Well, if you're happy with that, I want to share some statistics with you. And first of all, with that statistic in mind, first of all, it said 12 babies would be given to the wrong parents daily if you were just at 1/10 of 1% off. And it's interesting because when I first saw this, I was in a session like you, and I heard this from somebody. I said, okay, so what? When's lunch? You know, I didn't really care. My mind was on something else. And then I thought about it a little bit. And let me ask you this. How many of you have kids that don't look like you at all? And then I started worrying about this a little bit because I have a son who's tall and good looking, so I was wondering where he came from. But anyway, moving on that point. Other things with 99.9%, 18,322 pieces of mail would be mishandled per hour. 2 million documents will be lost by the IRS this year. You probably hope that will happen. All right. Yeah, you've done your studies on that, right? Okay, I know you. And 491 pacemaker operation went wrong, and it goes on and on and on. And the question I want to start off today by asking you this is, would you still be satisfied? Would your associates be satisfied? Would your customers be satisfied? Because here's the key, good is not good enough. You know, expectations are getting higher, the bar is being raised, and everybody's judging you by their experiences that they have with others. And when I talk about experiences, what I mean by that a little bit is, for example, I travel quite a bit. And I think my next frequent flyer award is a plane, believe it or not, but I travel quite frequently. And I stay at a lot of hotels. And when you stay at hotels, I sometimes have early sessions, and I get room service at like 6 a.m. And a lot of hotels, when you get room service at 6 a.m., it comes at what? It comes at 5 after, but who really cares, right? I really don't care. But then when I stay at Marriott's and I want a room service at 6 a.m., guess when it comes? It comes right at 6 a.m. on the nose. So what happens is I don't just get upset at other hotels or other services, but I get upset at you, not you personally, but you or you or you, when you're not on time for something or you're late for something. And it was interesting, I saw this recently by the Association for Professional Purchasing Agents. Anybody here a purchasing agent by any chance? There was a Association of Professional Purchasing Agents, and guess what they said? Guess what they said? The number one reason 76% of professional purchasing agents would not buy something from somebody for what reason? Take a wild guess. They didn't arrive, or they were late for the meeting. And how many? Is anybody here ever late? Just one person, okay. I like the honesty here, but anyway, you got to realize where you're coming from that. So what you're doing is, I just want to say from your organization here, you're competing against the Walmarts and the Disney Worlds and the Southwest Airlines because everybody is judging you by their experiences at that. So I've had great experience at Southwest. Guess what? I'm judging you by those experiences. So today what I want to focus on is focusing on building a wow customer experience by focusing on building rapport, relationships, and connections with others and how to do that. And if you follow these guidelines, you'll get along like these guys right here. You know, those guys can get along, you can too. Or like these guys right here. Oops, my thing just so those guys get along. So if you follow what we're going to say, you will do that. By the way, 3 resources I have because I know I'm here just for a short time, but the nice thing, you know, I always say it's not just this session, but what are you going to do afterwards to take some of these and actually use them? And first of all, we gave everybody a handout. Does everybody have a handout with them pretty much? I think we have a handout for you in your packet.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, it's in your packet. And I'm not saying to write down a lot of notes, but I'm saying take 1 or 2 notes in there because what happens if you try to do everything? You do what? You don't do anything, basically. So we'll have that. Also, I'm going to give you a link. I wrote a book called Get Along with Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere, How to Build Rapport, Relationships, and Connect with People. The only thing I can't do is deal with teenage girls. If you have any of those, don't ask me that question. But I will help you. I can help you with those. I'm also going to give you some card decks that you can use, and I have an email newsletter if you're interested, so you get tips from me every few days, not every few days, every week on stuff of these things that we're talking about. But we're going to follow along in that workbook. Second resource is myself, just to tell you where I'm coming from. I've literally done about 2,500 presentations and workshops training programs around the world. I work with a lot of IT companies to do these on building stronger customer and workplace relationships. I also help people with oral proposals, if you're familiar with that, and do presentation skills training in those areas too. And then I've written about 6 books and an adjunct professor at Georgetown and all those good things, so I'll leave you on that. But the third resource is you, because the best information comes from you. So if you have questions, comments, suggestions, war stories, you disagree with anything I'm talking about, please just feel free to yell it out, because this is your session. I am going to move relatively quickly too, because what's the average attention span of an adult? Anybody want to take a guess? 50 minutes. 50 minutes?
20 seconds.
20 seconds is close. You want to get, it's still 20 seconds is too high.
9 seconds. 8 seconds.
8 seconds. Somebody's been reading the Wall Street Journal lately. Yeah. They said the average attention span of an adult is 8 seconds. So you guys probably, and by the way, how much of this do you forget after 4 days of what I'm talking about? Take it, what percentage? It's actually about 96%. This is how I make a living. I just come back tomorrow and do it again. But anyway, you have no clue I was even here. So I will move relatively quickly. Also, the thing you're also competing against when you're talking to people is the average person looks at their cell phone how many times a day? This was a T-Mobile study. Million. I don't think it's a million, but it's actually 140 times a day people are looking at their cell phone. So and did you see that recently? It was actually, it gives you a good, what's the word for that? It gives you a good feeling. It makes you feel good I can't remember the word, but it's a good feeling to actually look at your cell phone. When those messages come in, people go good, so they always want to do it. So we're competing against that. That's why I'm going to move relatively quickly. So let's get in quickly to why, I want to start off with this, why customers leave. And why do people leave a business? And I just want you to, this was a study done with about 10,000 people in companies all over the country. And some of this may relate to you, some may not, but the last point there I want to point out. And the first one there is 1% die. And I had somebody come to me the other day and says, well, how do we handle that? I said, I don't know how you handle a guy dying. But anyway, that's the first reason. Another reason, 3% move away, 5% develop other friendships, 9% leave for competitive reasons. You know, it's interesting when I saw that 9% for competitive reasons, or 15, how about this one? 14% are dissatisfied with the product or service. How many of you don't like the bank you're at? Anybody not like the bank you're at? But it's such a, yeah, some of you, and it's just a hassle to move, isn't it, to do anything. So even if you're dissatisfied, you stay in some cases. But here's the one I want to talk about today, and it goes with this one right here. 68%, this is what you want to remember. 68% quit because of an attitude of indifference toward the customer by the owner, manager, or employee. So what I want you to think about, and this is what you might want to do at your office sometime, is do a 15-minute meeting and say, what does that actually mean when we talk about that attitude of indifference? And let me give you a real good example of this. I won't mention the company, but it's a company just like yours, although they were looking for it's a gigantic company, by the way, but they were looking to win a $542 million contract, IT contract, all those types of things, with the government. And they went in, and I was doing oral proposal presentation with them, and we worked on their presentation. You know, we spent days and days and days so they could get up and speak and come across well, and they had it down pat. But guess what happened when they went to do their oral proposal? You guys are the judges right here, right? They sat here. Here's the guy giving the presentation. Here behind me were the experts. You know how you have the technical experts sitting behind who they could call on with questions. And guess what, they had 8 people behind them. Guess what 3 of them were doing while this person was talking? Yeah, they were texting on their phone while these guys are trying to get a $542 million contract. And their presentation was dynamite. They had everything right. But when we talk about this indifference right here, they were texting and they found out, said, why did we lose that? They couldn't believe it because we'd gone through workshops, and they said, you just didn't look like you cared. Because if you don't care about me, I don't what? I don't care about you. So again, some of these things we just don't even get that we're doing anymore. And I want you to think about this a little bit more of how this is maybe hurting you in those areas. So the key is the people skills are the key that's building rapport, relationships, and connections that we're talking about. And the thing I want to mention right here is when you look at it, soft skills, the things we're going to talk about, those are those soft skills, those touchy-feely things where people say, don't get into that, really equals the hard results that you want. So it's really the bottom line issues. And 90% of all the problems I see, or 90% of the reasons that companies don't get clients a lot of times, or they lose clients, is because of some kind of people-related type of opportunity that go in there. And it was interesting too, since we're in election season right here, of how likability is so important. Bill Clinton recently was saying, I saw an interview with him on how to win an election. I don't know if anybody saw that interview, but he said 40% of the people will vote for you because of your party identification, whether you're Democrat or Republican. 40% will vote against you just because of their party identification. And 20% will vote for you because they what? They like you and they trust you. And that's where everybody tries to build in their extra characteristic there. So remember, people buy on emotion and backed by facts. If you want to remember something today, you may want to write that down. People buy on emotion and backed by facts. So it's really your likability, your trust, how you come across is something we're going to work with. And a good example of this too, Teddy Roosevelt said the single most important ingredient in formative success is knowing how to get along and connect with people. How many of you ever seen that show, So You Think You Can Dance? Anybody ever seen that? Just a few? Oh, a lot of you have seen that. Are any of you dancers by any chance? No. Okay, we're going to see you dance in a minute here. But So You Think You Can Dance, and there's a guy named Nigel on it who's one of the judges, and he said this. He says, it's not necessarily the best dancers who win, it's the ones they like the most. Think about that sometimes on those areas. And when you put this into perspective too, everything being equal, people deal with people they like and they trust. We all know that, right? That's simple stuff. They're equal, I'm going to deal with somebody I like and they trust. But here's the other flip side of that. Everything being unequal, they still deal with people they like and they trust. For example, has anybody here ever gone to look at a car or buy a car? Anybody here? Horse and carriage? No. And when you go to buy a car, have you ever went to buy a car and you just, for some reason, you just didn't like the person, they had the right deal, the right price, everything, but there's some reason you didn't like it? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Just didn't like the deal there? Yeah, and so it goes back into everything being equal, people deal with what? They deal with people they like trust, but unequal, they still deal with in those areas. Or if you hired, anybody have looked at an employee, was great on paper, but something about him when you met him just didn't fit? Oh, the HR people. And you can't say anything about it. I won't get into that too much, but, and you guys are all lucky because you all got hired, so there you go. So you're not in that category. Or a speaker even. I mean, I've seen speakers who are great speakers, but I've seen meeting planners and I'll never hire them in my life because they're just a pain in the neck. So there's a lot of things that go with this in that area. So here's the key. How many of you ever read Emotional Intelligence? Anybody read the book Emotional Intelligence? And Daniel Goleman said this: we're being judged by a new yardstick, not only just how smart we are by our training or expertise, but how well we handle ourselves and each other. So, and it's interesting too, I'm looking at outside customers, but how you get along with others also makes a point. One of my clients a long time ago was Agilent Technologies. I don't know if anybody's heard of them. They're in California. And I had to write this down on a napkin because I asked the president, what's your key to keeping customers and keep them all the way through? And he said this. He said 50% of all our obstacle success center around team dynamics, but then he went, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And by the way, this does not mean different cultures that you're from China or the United States. Or it's if I don't get along with you. You ever been working with somebody you didn't get along with? Anybody here? Anybody? Just two of you again? Jeez, man, it's amazing. You guys are such a great company. Everybody gets along so well. Excellent. Okay, but if somebody doesn't get along, you can have the best plans, the best strategies, and guess what? It really doesn't matter in those cases. And when you look at this too, it all starts in the hiring process, and I always like this from Barbara Smith, who said, there's no room for bullies, those with bad attitudes, rudeness, or disrespect in our company. Even if I have someone with top talent, they don't work collaboratively, I don't want them. I'd rather have a solid B team player than an A+ distraction. Anybody ever felt like that sometime? Because who would you rather work for? You know, sometimes that likability factor goes a long way, and there's more, as I said, 90% of the problems I see in companies are some kind of communication, personality breakdown area, which I can always relate it to when I go working with these organizations. So take a good look at yourself today, because a lot of times we don't see ourselves. I think a lot of people are delusional sometimes when they think they're great, or you ever see somebody say, you know, that person talks too much, but they're talking like crazy. Anybody know what I'm talking about? And they go like crazy, and they just don't see themselves. And there was a study done a long time ago by the Chamber of Commerce, and they did a study of the University of North Carolina, of 1,601 people in different companies, and they asked this question. They say, is there incivility in the workplace? Is there rudeness? Is there bullying? Is there backside? Is there friction? Is there poor customer relations? And when they asked those 1,601 people, 89% of them said yes. But when they asked those same people, they said, are you ever rude? Do you ever gossip? Do you ever treat people badly? Do you ever have bad customer relations? Guess what 99% of the same people said? No, I don't do that. So the question is, who's doing these types of things? And that's why you've really got to take a good look at yourself. And just to give you an example of how we don't see ourselves, does anybody, how many of you ever go in an elevator and don't look at anybody in the elevator? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody realize? Am I the only one, or just a few of you? Okay, you know how you just look at the floor, you look at the ceiling, you just don't want to make eye contact with anybody. And I remember I was in this elevator one time, and just to show you how somebody just didn't see themselves at all, I'm standing up here in front of the elevator, I'm right on the door, I didn't know anybody else was in there, and I started doing this. I started going, I started coughing really loud, I did not have my hand over my mouth, and all of a sudden, a woman in back of me screamed, and she says, "Didn't your mother teach you when you cough, you put your hand over your mouth?" She screamed at me like that. And what's your first reaction when somebody does that? You just want to knock them out. But I wrote this book called Get Along with Anyone, so I can't do that. But I turned around, I was really calm, and I looked her in the eye, and I said, "You know what, I really appreciate you telling me this, because quite frankly, that's how I got this cough. I don't want to give it to anybody else, and I want to thank you for letting me know that." And you know what she did? She immediately calmed down. And guess what she said next? She said, "You know what? You are so nice." She says, "When I tell people what I just told you in the nice way that I told you, they start yelling and screaming at me." And then she asked me, she said, "Well, what's their problem?" Now, I didn't have time to take out my slides and show her, but in her mind, she thought she was talking to me in a what? In a nice way. And a lot of times I do mediation work sometimes, because I'll work with people working together, and somebody says, "Well, I told them that in a nice way." And I said, "Let me hear your nice way," because a lot of these things get in the way of what we're doing. And we'll talk about this a little more too. So the key is the only person in this room you can change is who? Yourself. And if you don't believe me, has anybody here ever tried to change your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your kids? Anybody ever tried that before? And you wonder after your 9th divorce why it's not working anyway. So, and he said, "How did you guess?" I got one guy one time who had 9 divorces, so I couldn't believe it. I hit the right guy. But the problem is we just don't see ourselves in these areas that come through it. And when you put this into perspective a little bit too, there's a study that was done by Harvard and Stanford University a while ago, just when we talk about connecting with others, that basically said that only 15% of your success will be due to your technical skills, and 85% your social, your emotional intelligence, your ability to get along with others. And if you don't believe me, does anybody ever remember that Coast Guard captain that committed suicide a number of years ago? Anybody see that in the paper? He had medals and ribbons, and he was like technically fantastic at his job. But one day he went to a staff meeting like this, he said a bunch of off-color words, he offended a lot of people. Remember the Microsoft guy the other day? Well, he offended a bunch of people. This guy took it personally, because he got filed grievances against him. So again, you do that. Or there was a woman in the Senate office building. Did anybody see that? She lost her job because she would, every time somebody came in, she'd say, "Thanks, babe, thanks, hon, thanks, babe, thanks, hon, thanks, babe, thanks, hon." And somebody said, "I'm offended that she's calling me babe." And guess what? You might think this is stupid, but she lost her job because of that. So you really got to watch how you come across. Also, I would suggest you want to watch out too on stereotyping others. A lot of times, we have pictures of people in our mind, and we talk to them in certain ways. We may ignore them because of that. And just to give you an example, I don't have anything to write up here, but give me some of the negative, when you think of men, give me some of the negative or aggravating behaviors of men. What would be? They don't listen. What did you say again? No, just kidding. No, they don't listen. What else? Negative or aggravating stereotypes of men. They think they're always right. Okay. What else? They what? Anybody got some others? They think they're... Pardon? Somebody said they don't ask directions. Okay, we got that one. What else? Is that it? That's all the negative or aggravating stereotypes of men? That's it? Well, I guess it's the afternoon, so let me move on a little bit. Give me some of the negative aggravating stereotypes of women. I heard somebody say never forgets. What was the one you were saying?
60-40 split.
60-40 split. Anything else? Too bossy. Nagging, somebody said.
Too scared to say.
Too scared to say. I'm sorry? Emotional. Okay, and I think we're getting the idea here. I won't drag this on But when we talk about connecting with others and things to keep those relationships and keep people liking you and trusting you, why did I even bring this up? Does anybody have a clue why we're talking about this? Nobody has a clue. Okay. The reason I wanted to say this is you really got to watch out. Just to give you an example of this, and you got to watch this in your daily jobs too. There was one woman I was working with. I won't mention the company, but she was a CEO of a company. And remember we said 15% of your success in life will be due to your technical skills, and 85% is your social, your communication, your emotional intelligence. By the way, you have to be technically correct. If you're not good at your job, you won't have a job. But if you want to build rapport, relation, connect, you got to work on those other things. But there was this one woman, and she was the head of a company. She was the CEO of a company, and a vendor came in, and he had the right price, right product, right everything going for him. But when he came in to speak, just picture this. She's sitting here. And she's the woman, and here's two men, one man sitting here, one man sitting here, and this guy comes in to sell her something. He had everything going perfectly for him, but who did he look at the whole time? The men, yeah. He never looked at the woman in charge. Now he had the best price, but remember we said everything being equal, people do what? They deal with people they like and trust, but unequal, they still deal with people and trust. He had the best of everything, but when she walked out, I heard these guys, she said, you didn't want to be there when she said, thank you very much. But she banged the table and she says, I don't want anybody working with him or that company ever again. And again, people are irrational. So I mean, I know we should do the best deal and the best this, but you really got to look at some of these things that we're talking about in that case. So think about that, working on those things, and that's what we'll talk about today too. The other thing I want to mention here is when we talk about developing relationships and just sitting in courses like this, we become complacent because we're saying, we ate the big pies, we had our candy, we're tired, all that stuff. And he said, I know, a lot of times we think we know everything at this point too, because how many of you ever read this book, by the way, Good to Great? Anybody ever read Good to Great? People, a couple of you read it? Well, if you didn't read it, I'm going to give you the summary right here, so you don't have to read it now. But he says, good is the enemy of great. And what I mean good is the enemy of great is we become complacent because everyone in this room is good. You're good, you're good, you're good. You wouldn't be hired if you were not good, right? So the problem is we become so good that we don't learn more, we turn our minds off to things, and then we miss some points all the way. And a lot of times we're so good at stuff that we forget that we think we're right all the time. And just to make my point a little bit, I'd like everybody real quickly, by the way, I'm not going to do any weird exercises. You don't have to sing Kumbaya or do any group hugs. He wants the group hugs? Okay, this is the guy who's doing the group hug. If you want it, you're going to get him. But we're not going to do any group hugs, but I want you to do something real quickly for me, and it's to make a point. And I'd like everybody real quickly just to close your eyes, and don't touch anybody near you, by the way. Close your eyes. And keep your eyes closed, and with your right hand, point where you think north is. With your right hand, point where you think north is. Okay, everybody got that? With your right hand, point where you think north is. Now with your left hand, raise your hand if you think you're right. Just keeping your eyes closed, with your left hand, point if you think right. Okay, now keeping your hands up, everybody look around the room. And then where everybody has their hands pointed. Okay, that's north up there. Okay. Somebody has north down there. Okay, I think where north is. I don't know, and I have no clue where north is, but I bet somebody's going to take out their cell phone and tell me. And by the way, that's not the point. This is where nobody cares about the point. They just want to know where north is. So I don't care the stupid point. Just where is north? That's up. He's using the iPhone thing. Does it work? North is that way. Okay, for your information. Isn't that amazing? That's the only thing people care about. Does anybody care what the point is? No. Okay. That is north. No point. So, what is the point anyway? But the point of this is a lot of us think what? A lot of us raise our hand because we think we're right, and I saw 80 different directions of where north is. And you really got to watch that sometimes because we put ourselves in that category, and then we don't learn things and we don't move ahead. So stick with that. And by the way, watch out so your ego doesn't get in the way too. And when I talk about ego, let me give you an example of this too. One of my clients is the National Automobile Dealers Association, and I speak for auto dealers. I speak at a lot of their meetings. And I was speaking at the national conference in Las Vegas a couple years ago, and I turned in my slides to let's say Debbie, who's the HR director. Well, it wasn't Debbie, it was somebody else, but I turned in my slides, and the person looking at it said, just because they wanted slides in advance, they said, these slides are not really that good. It doesn't really meet our expectations. And you know where your mind, I didn't say anything, but you know where your mind's going like, well, who do you think you are? And I'm 2,500 speeches. I get called back all the time. And then I thought about it a little bit, is where's your ego sometimes getting in the way, your shoulds, your should nots, your ego of getting better? Ever been in that case? And if I had longer time, I'd actually have people write down think about this a little bit, because a lot of times we don't get as successful as we can be because we don't listen to others, and we think we're always right, we think we know everything. So what I want to make sure you do is, there's another book which I want you to stay away from. Everybody see this one, Great to Good? I can't believe that. We do not want to go backwards. We want to be good to great, so we'll cross that one out and then we'll move on from there. So now that we're not complacent anymore and we're moving ahead, how many of you heard of this term before, moment of truth? Anybody heard of that before? And moment of truth means that every time and this is a key for you these days when you talk about building rapport and relationships and connections, every time you have a meeting, a transaction, or an interaction with anyone, an impression is formed. So as soon as you walk in a door, how long do you think it takes somebody to make up their mind about you?
10 seconds.
It's milliseconds. I mean, it's like, I thought you gave at least 2 seconds. They take you right away. So some of the interactions that you have to watch out for that. And a good example of that, anybody remember there was a television show, Susan Boyle, anybody remember that name? She was on, what's it called, Britain's Got Talent, and it was like an American Idol, and she was a singer, but she's sitting in the audience, and they always showed this picture. She didn't look like a singer. Anybody know what I'm talking about? They thought she didn't look like it, and you saw all the audience go, oh, who does she think is? She can't do it. And then Simon Cowell, who's on American Idol, is going like, oh, he's doing his eyes like this. And then she blows him out of the water. But a lot of times, you got to watch out. That first impression makes a difference, and we'll talk about that I'll talk about those areas. So what we're going to talk about today is this, that moment of truth, and we're going to talk how to make every interaction positive, memorable, and special. So if you remember that acronym, PMS, positive, memorable. So if you walk away today and say you didn't learn anything, now you know what that means. Right? You didn't know what that meant before, did you? It was already taken. Yeah, so I just have to get that in. But when I talk about making everything positive, memorable, special, you do not have to do much to look good these days. For example, has anybody here ever returned a phone call and somebody said, geez, thanks for calling me back? Anybody ever had that happen? They're so thrilled because nobody calls back. And just to give you an example of this, a number of years ago, somebody was looking for a speaker for one of their meetings. By the way, they were not looking for me. I just want to point that out. They were not looking at me. But they called me up and they said, we're having a meeting in a few months and we're looking for a speaker for our meeting. And then they said this on the phone. We have 2 other speakers we've used in the past. They're great, they're fantastic, they're the best you've ever seen. They're telling me this on the phone. There's nobody who can compare. I'm like, well, thanks for sharing that stuff. And they told me how great they were. And they said, however, because of our rules, and you probably understand this, Arnold, we have to look at 3 vendors. Anybody ever been in a company where you have to look at 3 people to make it look fair, so to speak? But anyway, you have to look at 3 vendors. And they said, we need 3 vendors, so we just have these 2. And do you mind if we put you on the list? And don't take it personally, but we're definitely not going to use you. I said, oh, geez, thanks for this offer. But I said, fine, put me on the list. I don't care. I didn't care if they want to put me on the list, they put me on the list. But it was amazing because 3 weeks later, they called me up and they called me back and they said, we want to hire you. Now, I wouldn't recommend what I said next to them because I said, well, what happened to the people you really liked? Which is a stupid thing to say, but you know what they told me? They never, return the phone call. And you ever lost something, by the way, because you weren't responsive enough? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Or it's like you weren't on time, or you didn't take something, and you gotta be quick these days because people are, moving as fast. But we don't want to just talk about regular things you can do today. We want to talk about stuff that really makes a difference. We want to make sure that you become more memorable. How do you stand out? And a good example of this, how many of you can remember something that happened, let's say, 15 years ago, but if I ask you what happened yesterday, you can't remember? Anybody like that? Okay, just mind goes, but you can remember something 15 years ago? And a good example of this, I have a son who's like 20 years old, and 15 years ago he's 5 years old, and I was getting on a flight, and by the way, I've been on 1 million flights, and I forget them all because, when you just do good work, what happens? Nobody remembers it. But when I got on this flight, a guy came out of the pilot comes out, this was before 9/11, pilot comes out of the cockpit, and he goes up and he says, hey son, he pulls my son by the collar and he says, how would you like to fly this plane? So he brings the little kid up in the cockpit and he's playing like this, and I said, don't touch any buttons. I was getting a little scared there. But because of that, I can remember the flight attendant's name. I can remember everything about that flight like it was yesterday. It gave a real positive message to me. I can remember the passengers scared to death. I could see their fights, but all of this came to be. So again, what are you doing to make every meeting positive, memorable, and special? And I would recommend you have a 15-minute meeting and do something in that area to make that work for you. So with that in mind, I'd like to do a quick little exercise with you, because one of the things that comes up right now is communication crushers. And at your tables, can everybody do this real quickly? Can you point your finger in the air? I want you to point to somebody in the group. I want you to point to the spokesperson. Point to somebody in your group to be the spokesperson of your group. Everybody point to somebody. Everybody got somebody? Okay, somebody's going to have to be somebody in here. Okay, so what I want you to do now we got our spokesperson. Just pick somebody, that's it. I probably shouldn't have done that answer. Just pick somebody. This person's going to have to take notes, and this is just a 3-minute exercise. And let me give you the so what behind this exercise. Here's why we're doing it. Because today we're talking about building rapport, relationships, and connections, making it positive, memorable, and special. So what are some of the communication crushers that get in the way of us having good relationships with others? Like not saying hello in the morning, or not being friendly, or not showing appreciation. I'm not going to give you all the answers, but I want this from you, because these are what your coworkers are saying that's important, not just me saying it. I want it from the coworkers. So I just want to brainstorm, yell out to that person real quickly, and I'm going to go around the room here in about 3 minutes. So yell out, what are some of the communication crushers that get in the way of having good connections and good relationships with others? All right, so here's what your coworkers are saying are some of the crushers. And by the way, if you see any of these things, you may want to write them down and say, don't do this, okay, on that aspect of it. And by the way, I think on the last page of your handout, do we have a handout in front of you? I just want to see. See where it says there's a light bulb, putting thoughts into actions? This is the page sometimes when I go to sessions like this, when I walk away. You know how you put things just on one page? If you hear something you should work on, just write it on that page. Because like a lot of times I just get these things and they go, how many of you get these things and you throw them in a pile somewhere and say you're going to look at it, you never do. And so that last page is the one I take home. But let me see, here's what your coworkers are saying is important.
Eye contact, appearance, and direct language.
And what language?
Direct language, like talking clearly and making people understand what you're
Okay, yeah, talking clearly and making understand. What were some of the ones that on this group here? Who was the lucky spokesperson? Oh.
Negative energy, blaming others, not being prepared, not being polite, not responsive.
Okay, is everybody doing all these things? I mean, not doing all these things. So, let me get down here a little bit. If I could, yeah, you look like you're anxious to go. There you go.
So we have a few. First one is interruptions. When you're having a conversation.
By the way, if I can interrupt you for a second. Let me just say something about interruptions. When you interrupt people, sensitivity, rapport, commitment are killed. People hate being interrupted. For example, does anybody know anybody who talks really slow and you're just dying to put words in their mouth? Anything like that? Don't go there. Okay, just don't go there, because people hate that. Just take a breath before you're going to put it. But you know how we're so rushed? Okay, let's go. Don't get in that sense. Okay, interruptions.
Off-topic conversations, lack of attention, not being punctual, and lack of diversity for others' opinions.
Okay, lack of diversity for others' opinions, and that means paying attention to others. Good job there. Can I just get one more back here? Who wants to go? Anybody? Okay, yeah.
No eye contact, bad body language, being rude, tone, and not showing appreciation.
And all you guys are doing that? Is that it? No. Okay. Any comments from back there? Or oh yeah, I think you want to say. I'm trying to know if I can get everybody here, but yeah.
Few of them have if somebody's over communicating.
Over communicating.
Yeah, or talking too much. Another way. Or they're mumbling.
Talking too much. Okay.
And not listening or paying attention.
Okay, not listening or paying attention. By the way, listening is a key factor. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And think of the people you like the most too. They probably listen.
A lot of ours were repeats, so we did have talking to someone and they're checking their cell phone, which I think a lot of us are tempted to do.
Right.
That distraction.
Yeah. By the way, being at the moment. She had a good point here. And that's one people hate. I get that compliment thing all the time. You're paying, we're talking Raj here. Just pay attention to him. Well, maybe not him, but I'm just kidding. But I mean, pay attention, and how many times it's so easy to, how we're addicted to those cell phones, you just got to pick them up all the time. So watch out. Tonight, I got your picture. Okay, and here's who, yeah.
We have emotions, cultural differences, environment, and physical needs.
And physical needs meaning?
for example, if I have a headache, I won't be paying attention to who is communicating because I have that physical need of, you know, I guess pain.
Okay. And when she says physical needs, one thing I also want to mention, there's an acronym you may want to write down. I don't have it up here, but it's called HALT. How many have heard of that? HALT, H-A-L-T. And we may not be paying attention. We may get angry at people because of that. And what's the H? Anybody know what the H is? What happens? Why do we get angry sometimes or upset? Because we're hungry, right? You guys shouldn't be hungry today. I'm looking at this table. You are definitely not hungry. Okay? If you're hungry, that's your problem. I don't know. Okay. But hungry. So a lot of times, you ever been hungry and it's just like somebody says something, what are we? We're quicker with people. We talk to them real fast. We're obnoxious and all that stuff. So watch out for that. What's the A? Angry. We're already angry at people. So you ever drive into work and you got cut off in traffic or something and you're angry at the world, and guess what happens? You start blaming everybody. The L is lonely. Well, you got this down pat. Lonely would be when nothing's going on right, and then you're tired. Okay. And I'm going to let you do the rest here. You got it. I like people like this. Okay.
Jerry and Ivana.
Okay, Jerry and Ivana. Okay, she's the one. Triple her salary right now. So. Uh-oh, is this when I leave, I guess? This is when you're not welcome anymore. But when she says tired, how many of you, I take a lot of these anybody ever do these all-night flights from California, the red eyes? Anybody ever done those before? And how many, when you're tired, what happens? Somebody calls you on the phone, it's like, what do you mean by that? You start getting more edgy. And I know when I take these all-night flights, I do not answer the phone the next day because I'm going to lose customers. If I get on there. So just watch out for that stuff, part of it. Okay, did we get this table? Which table did I miss? Did I miss anybody else? Oh, we've got it here, okay.
Lack of respect and being too aggressive, no direction or agenda.
No direction or agenda. Where are we going with this? By the way, when he says no direction or agenda, you might want to write this down too. So what? So what? When you're trying to talk to people about things, it's like when I come here today, all of you are thinking like, so what? What's this about? Why is he talking to us? Why, and if you can't answer that in your mindset, you're not relevant to the people you're talking to. So think of that, so what? Who else did I miss? Did I get this table here? I can't remember.
Ours are basically all the same.
Same? Anything different? Or?
Bad attitude, lack of appreciation, lack of basic manners.
Okay, lack of basic manners. And by the way, here's another thing from attitude, to keep your attitude in shape all the time. You may want to write this down too. And this will keep you so you're always in good shape. I say, what am I grateful for at this moment? How many of you ever asked that self to yourself when things are going bad? And you know what? You can't be upset. When you really think about it, because you're a lot better. I have to go to this session today. Well, you should be lucky you got a job, right? Or something in your life. You have your life, and nothing can be as bad as some of the situations we have. It's a small group. So,
one thing that is different with a perceived lack of credibility.
Perceived lack of credibility.
You don't believe whatever the person's saying for whatever reason.
Yeah, you don't believe, and that's if you don't know something, don't just try to pretend that you know it in that case. And last but not least, who was over here?
Yeah, we had a lot of the same thing. The only real thing that we had that was kind of off the wall was it's hard to communicate with somebody that has like bad hygiene.
Bad hygiene. That comes up more than you think. Bad hygiene. I've heard that a lot of times. So and I can get into that later. But that's something that I've worked with people on how to say that in a nice way. And I can talk about that later if you want. But moving on. But one thing I want to mention too, and all of you are going to get a link to get the copy of this book, a PDF copy of my book here, the Get Along book. But I'm just going to read you really quickly because a lot of people talked about rudeness. But I got this from a professor in New York when I wrote this, and he gave the 10 top acts of rudeness. So you don't have to write these down necessarily. I don't know if that's even in your handout, but let me just give these to you because I heard that come up a lot. This is what he said. So if you're doing any of these things, take them out of your vocabulary. I'm not saying write all these down, but if you see yourself doing one of these, write that down. And then look at when you get this book, just write 227. Look at page 227 when you get the PDF copy. But I'm just going to go over these relatively quickly. These were his top 10 acts of rudeness, and just make sure you don't do these. I said, talking about someone behind his or her back. By the way, what happens when you talk to someone behind his or her back? What happens? What's lost? What?
It'll get around to them eventually.
It'll get around to them eventually. And what? Trust. There you go. There we go. What Debbie said. Debbie said trust, because let's say I go to Debbie and I say, Debbie, it's Linda. I say, Debbie, Linda does this and Linda does that and Linda does this thing. And as soon as I leave, what's Debbie thinking? What am I going to say about her? So you're really watching. By the way, there is good gossip, though. What's good gossip? When you say nice things. So I say, Debbie, Linda is really great. And so when Debbie goes to Linda and says, hey, he said you're really great, that's even more important than actually me saying it. So if you want to do backhanded stuff, try that. Number 2, active, this is not in any order, but interrupting others when they are speaking or working was number 2. Interrupting others when they are speaking or working, we talked about that earlier. Number 3 was flaunting status or authority, acting in a condescending manner. Well, I know everything, you don't, acting in that way. Number 4, belittling someone's opinions to others. Number 5, failing to return phone calls or respond to memos. We talked about that earlier. Number 6, giving others the silent treatment. Has anybody ever been had that situation where you're in a meeting or talking and they just ignore you again? Number 7, insults, yelling, and shouting. I won't even go there, but take that totally out of your area. Number 8, verbal forms of sexual harassment, and we can talk about that, but that's another aspect. Number 9, staring, dirty looks, or other negative eye contact. By the way, has anybody ever done that? And you're in a meeting and somebody says something and you go like, anybody ever roll your eyes sometimes? Stupidest thing I've ever heard. And you don't even know you're doing that sometimes. That's the scary part. And then number 10, intentionally damning with faint praise. What does that mean? Intentionally damning with faint praise. Does anybody know what that means? Patronizing is a good part of that, but it's like a sort of a backhanded compliment. Like I could say, David, you did a great job on this, but you know what, if you've done this, and this better. It's like my wife from one time when my son was like 6th grade and he got all A's and a C. And guess what she focused on? The C. Yeah, she said, what's this stupid C? What's this stupid C? I was just happy that he graduated from elementary school. That was my job. I said, he got all C's. I was just graduating the stupid place. So it just makes a difference. But take a look at that and ask yourself if you're in those categories on those areas. Now, the next thing, one of the things that people said when I went around the room was lack of appreciation. And by the way, the reason for your customers, you should show more appreciation to your customers, and that can be as simple as what? Just a simple thank you sometimes, which a lot of times we don't do. But I want to do a little exercise here, then I want to get a point. Can everybody just turn to if you can team up with just one person next to you, everybody do that real quickly. Just say hello to the person next to you and team up real quickly. Team up, and by the way, since you have 3, maybe the 3 of you together. If there's a thing with 3 people, get 3 of you together. If there's not even numbers there, so 3 of you 2 together, and you can figure this out somehow. You guys are perfect. You're perfect. Okay. So here's what I'd like you to do real quickly. On page, what's page 5? Yeah, page 5. See where it says list 5 positive things? I want you at this point, don't say a word. I just want you to look at the other person and write down 5 positive things about that person. Don't say a word. Okay, you can don't write negative things, just positive things. Okay, don't say a word. Just look at them and write 5 positive things about that person. Okay? Everybody got that? Just write 5 positive things about the person there. Don't say a word. Everybody quiet for a second. Just 5. The first thing is, even if you don't know that person, just positive things that come to your mind. You can look at them, you can think that they're dressed well, they're intelligent. I'm just trying to give you hints, but Everybody writing 5 things? I'll give you another 30 seconds. Quick. You guys can do it negative. Don't go there. Okay, what I'd like you to do is each person take a turn, and if you have 2 people, just take a turn, tell the other person what you wrote, and if you have 3, tell the other 2 what you wrote. So everybody take a turn and just tell the other person what you wrote. and you can tell people later what you had. But how many, just be honest with me, how many of you felt a little uncomfortable? Be honest, how many felt a little uncomfortable doing this? Okay, usually I get about half the room when I say this, but when I work with companies, because I've been doing this for like 25 years or so, when I work with companies, one of the biggest complaints I hear when I go to talk to everybody, you know, I'll do a team building workshop for 2 days and I'll talk to the staff beforehand and I'll say, what's the biggest concern? And guess what, when you look at what motivates people, you know, in general, what motivates people is what you ask them. It's different than this, depending on where you're at. But what motivates people, appreciation usually comes up as one of the things. Now, a lot of people say money, but money necessarily, you know, let's put it this way. Money is not necessarily motivated. Money, I will not work with you if you don't get enough money, let's put it that way, but I could still hate my job and you can pay me a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. So there's a difference between motivation and money. But a lot of you raised your hands and said it's a little uncomfortable. And let me ask you this, why is this a little uncomfortable? Why don't we show appreciation as much as we do? Because everybody complains, I mean, not to say everybody, but so many complaints about this when I'm working with teams, and also with customers. If you want excellent customer relations, you've got to show appreciation out of it. Why do we get, let me ask you this, why don't we show as much appreciation? Or why are we not uncomfortable with this? Anyone want to take a shot?
Scared.
We're scared? Okay, maybe it's just not in our normal way where we are. What else?
Good is not enough.
Good is not enough? Okay, that's another reason, yeah?
Perception, because the other person might think that there's some secret motive behind appreciation.
There might be some secret agenda or motive to be nice. And by the way, when I say appreciation, don't walk out of this workshop today and start going, oh, you're great, you're fantastic, you're the greatest thing. Don't just, you've got to earn it, okay? But don't miss the opportunity to say something when you can on that case. But the point is, a lot of times people feel uncomfortable. A lot of times people never got this when they were young either, so they don't start doing it at this point. I heard a bad argument the other day. Somebody said, well, my boss doesn't do it, so I should. Well, that's not a really good excuse, but a lot of times we're a little nervous. But I recommend that you take a look at this. And I want to give you one real example, too. One of my clients one time was a woman in charge of company. I do a lot of coaching for executives, and she had about 20 employees, and I was working with her. And one of the things that came up was that on her evaluation, she got really good evaluations, except for one area. It was low in appreciation. And I asked her, I said, why don't you show more appreciation? And she says, the reason I don't do it is because I don't need it. And the point of that is she's looking from her own rule book, so to speak, on how to do things and how that works. And you really need to take a look at what you think or what you feel or what your rules are not necessarily what other people necessarily think. So just be aware of that aspect of it. So take a good look at your rule book in that area where you're coming from. Okay, so now, as we said before, one of the areas, the problems, is I said we don't see ourselves. And so now we've talked about some of the communication crushers, some of the things you need to take a look at and write the one thing down that you're going to work on. But the other thing that I want to point out here is this. Okay, it's how you say it, not what you say. How many of you heard of that before? And if you've ever been to a workshop in your life, you've probably seen this statistic, that there was a study done that only 7% of the message that people hear about you are by the words you use, 38% is by your tone of voice, and 55% is by your body language. So what they're saying here is 93% of the message that people perceive is by your what? Your body language or tone of voice. So if you don't believe me, let's say I came here today and I went like this and I said, I'm real happy to be here. I'm saying the words right, but no, we ain't. You ever been to a meeting where somebody says, oh, it's a pleasure to be here? Just know they just want to get out of here as fast as they can. So just be aware. So I want to give you a little acronym to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy, and it's this, SOFTEN. And soften your image. So how do you soften your image to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy? And what did we say before? People deal with people they like and they trust. It's just a human nature thing. So the S would be what? Give me the S. Smile. Okay, when I say smile, if you do not normally smile, don't start doing it all of a sudden, okay? Because people will wonder what you're up to. So, why is he smiling? Am I losing my job? They can rob me for once. Don't smile unless it's really good. Okay. Also, when I say smile, smile only when appropriate. You ever see these guys on the news? I saw a guy the other day that says, hi, Des and Fallujah. You know, I mean, and it's that nervous smile that comes out. And you know what I'm talking about? Anybody seen anybody like that? And they nervously smile when it's the wrong time to smile on that. And by the way, what's a trick to make sure you smile Make sure, a lot of times we talk on the phone too, right? So how do you make sure you smile when you're on the phone? Pardon? Yeah, did you hear what Debbie said? Do you guys do that here? Okay, well, Debbie mentioned something that I've done with a lot of other companies to work with. We instituted this because, you know, you can go to these workshops and say, or these sessions, these short sessions and say, smile, and everybody writes it down, nobody ever does it. But we put a mirror next to every person's desk at this company. And what happened is when they got on the phone, it had to go like this. It would go ring, 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 ring. Good morning, how are you? And they had to look at themselves in the mirror, and everybody said, oh, they're so nice, they're so pleasant. Their complaints went down 42%. I always like it when I have a number I can put with these things, but they said their complaints and everything, they got up 42% less complaints because people said, oh, they're so nice and they're so pleasant. So a mirror next to everybody's desk in that case. By the way, you know, I don't know if you knew this, but Hyatt hotels used to do this. If you went to a Hyatt hotel and you applied for a position at a Hyatt and you did not smile at least 5 times in a 5-minute interview, guess what happens to your odds of getting a job at Hyatt? You did not get a job at a Hyatt. I actually had a group the other day, somebody says, well, that's unfair. They should tell you to smile before you go. I said, no, that doesn't work. That's a person you wouldn't hire anyway, right? So, yeah. Okay, so first thing on your list is smile, right up there. Next thing, to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy, the O is? Somebody said it. Open. Okay, and open means this. How many of you do this as a habit? Cross your arms. Anybody do this? Okay, there's nothing wrong with this because this could mean I'm cold, right? Or I'm comfortable this way. But what do people pick it up as? Pardon? They pick it up as closed. They pick us up as it's closed. And so you really got to watch out. And people perceive you as being more arrogant, out of touch. You ever get in a disagreement with somebody and you start doing this? And what do? They just like, it gets worse, the agreement that you have. So the O is open. So that's open. The F is? Friendly is excellent, but it's wrong. I'm sorry. No, it's just, friendly is good. Friendly, yours are just as good as mine. Pardon? Focus. Focus, who said focused? All right, give him raise his salary too. Okay, focused means, when we talk about focus, it's paying attention to somebody you're talking to. It's looking. Have you ever been to a meeting or something where you're talking to somebody and they're not looking at you at all? Anybody know what I'm talking about? They're just looking all around. It's sort of like at a party and you go and it's like maybe there's somebody better looking. Who knows? I mean, it's just you don't have that thing. So paying attention to somebody really makes a difference in that case. So the F is focus. What's the T? By the way, forward lean means leaning towards the person you're talking. You're not leaning over like this, but leaning towards them. Pardon? The T, trustworthy, that's a great one, but T is talent. You have to have talent sometimes. You've got to talk to communicate, that's excellent, but tone, somebody said tone was 38%, so that's good. This is a little trickier here, because this is territory. And what do I mean by territory? I'm sorry, your name is again? Liz. Let's say, for example, I'm getting really close to Liz here. She's kicking me. She said, I didn't buy into this. I'm leaving now. But in American culture, this is all American culture, by the way. This does vary by culture. So when I go overseas or meet with different cultures, I have to read the whole. There's a different book I read on this. But when I'm in American culture, the ideal distance to be away from somebody is what? Did you say 30 feet? Yvonne, you told me this was an advanced group, didn't you? It's 30 feet. Oh my God. No, 30 feet, sometimes you want to be away 30 feet from somebody, but... Pardon? Is that restraining? Restraining order. Yeah, restraining order. But... Arm's length? Okay, it's close. It's about 14 inches to 4 feet is the ideal distance. 14 inches to 4 feet is the ideal distance. But anybody know anybody like this when you're talking to them, you're right in your face and you step backwards, they just don't. And all you pick up is what? Bad breath. You just want to get out of there. So be aware of how you can be, you got to watch out for that. The next thing on there is E, which is enthusiasm. And let me say something, that's not it, but let me give you why I'm saying I want to bring that up. Give Liz credit for that one. If you're trying to persuade, motivate, or influence somebody, I work a lot with people on their presentations and stuff, people are more convinced by your energy, enthusiasm, and conviction than by anything else you do. You might want to remember that somewhere. People are more convinced by your energy, enthusiasm, and conviction. Most people speak in a very what? Monotone. And how many of you ever hear somebody, you tune in, you tune out, tune in, tune out, And you really got to keep that energy up. It's sort of like those politicians who are all not convicted, who have a lot of conviction, and they just, you just follow them no matter what because they're so enthusiastic, right? They're so excited on things. So just be aware of that aspect of it. But the E is, what if you don't do this, you don't have rapport with people? The E is, somebody said it, eye contact, yeah. So the E is eye contact. And by the way, when I say eye contact, I do not mean staring at anyone. There is a fine line between staring and stalking, so watch out that you don't do that. And in American culture, the ideal time to keep your eyes on anyone is what? 5 seconds? Yeah, actually you said 5 seconds. Yeah. It's about 3 to 5 seconds is ideal, but don't start doing this. Okay, gotta get off now. Don't time it. Okay? Please don't time it. I don't want to see you doing that type of thing. Also, when we talk about eye contact too, how do you tell when you're talking, let's say a customer or somebody you're working with, how do you tell if they like you or are buying into what you're saying? You don't like anything I'm saying. No, how do you tell by their eyes? Body language by their eyes, though. How do you tell by their eyes if they're buying into what you're saying? Or this is important when you're talking to somebody, you're trying to persuade somebody. Are they buying into what you're saying or not? Pardon?
They maintain eye contact. They
maintain it? No? Okay, a lot of times what you really need to look at sometimes is the pupils tend to dilate. So if we're talking and all of a sudden my pupils, then you either like what I'm saying or you're buying into it. Now there is exceptions to that because I was doing a workshop for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. I worked with a bunch of doctors lately, earlier, and one of the doctors raised his hand and he says, Arnold, I don't mean to be rude. By the way, when somebody says that, you know you're going to get a zinger. He says, I don't mean to be rude. But he says, when the eyes dilate, it also could mean they're on drugs. So you think people like you? No, they're just on drugs. There is a thing that goes along with that. But anyway, keep on that. By the way, the only time I would recommend against good eye contact is, how many of you have ever been on a plane and you've been on the aisle seat and you had that middle seat open? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You're sitting in the aisle, you have the middle seat open, everything is great. And then they announce on the loudspeaker, the standbys will be coming on. Anybody have that ever? And then it's like, oh God, and then you think you had it made. But that's when you just want to look down and never look at it. Because the standbys coming on are doing what? They're looking for a friendly face. So always keep your eyes down. Not looking at anybody. Read your book because they're looking, and that first time the first person looks up, guess what? They're going to sit right next to them. Because nobody wants you next to them, right? So they want that open seat free. So eye contact is that. The last thing to make yourself more approachable, likable, trustworthy is the N, which is? Nodding. Nodding? Who said nodding? All right, excellent. And not nodding off now. Not nodding off. You know, a lot of times we're yawning when we're talking to people and all that. And I want to give you a quick little exercise. I want everybody to do this to keep you from yawning for 20 minutes. There's a trick you can use. It's a physiological thing you can do. Everybody, I like really quickly, is to take a big, everybody take 2 deep breaths. And I don't know why this works, but for 20 minutes you won't yawn. There's something about the whole system that works from there. Anybody know what I'm talking about? What's the reason for that? You know? Oxygen deprived. Okay, there's the answer. So this will help you. So if you have an important meeting to go to, you want to talk to a customer and you don't want to look like you're yawning to them, watch out. And by the way, when you're on the phone and you're nodding, you know, we don't have our body language on the phone, right? So let me hear how you nod on the phone. Let me hear everybody. Let's say you're on the phone. Let me hear everybody's nod on the phone. Everybody. Okay, I don't know if I'm buying into this. You got to watch how that comes across, because that sends a message to people. And just to give you an example of this, my wife, she works actually, she's an attorney, but she works over the SEC, and she actually, every time I talk to her, she goes like this. I'll say, how things going? And she'll tell me for 2 seconds. Just say, how's things with you? And as soon as I start talking, guess what she does? She goes, which literally means, look, I got better things to do than talk with you. I don't have time to do this. And I wanted to test her one day to see if she was really listening to me. I called her up, and I was in California. I was coming home on an all-night flight, and she says, how things going? And as soon as I started talking, she went, and a minute of ahas. You know what I said to her? I said, you know what, Nancy? I am leaving with another woman. And guess what she said? She says, She says, I'll I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. She said, and she said, see ya. And I thought, God, she did not hear one word I said. And then I found out later that women listen a lot better than I thought. Because I came home the next day, I put my keys in the door, and she looked at me, she says, well, what are you doing at home? I thought you left with another woman. So I just don't watch it on those cases. So why did I go over this? You need to look at these things because if you want to be more approachable, likable, trustworthy, you have to have these things. And here's the point. If you're not doing these things, people aren't listening to you at all. So if you're not smiling, thinking, why is that guy so grumpy going through your head? Or if you're in my face, I'm not listening to you. If you're doing these things, so we don't have any communication going. Also, you ever seen that somebody, you're not as approachable. So let's say somebody says, is there a question? You ever had somebody speaking and they said, are there any questions that you would never dare ask? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Just the way they just grumpy and they look the way they come across. So you got to watch that aspect too. By the way, this does vary by culture, and I know a lot of you are going to say that. And just to give you an example, don't give this away. Is anybody here from Australia, by the way? Just before I bring this up. Okay. This was a number of years ago. Is anybody old enough to remember George Bush #1? Just a few of you are old enough? Okay. Back in 1992, he was, and don't give this away if you've seen this before, but he was in Australia, and he was in a motorcade. And he was doing this in Australia. So if you know what I'm talking about, don't give it away, but he was doing this. You are the Australians, and you're saying, yes, George Bush is here, and you're all excited, right? But he started to do this in the motorcade, smiling to the crowd. He's going this in Australia. Now in the US, this means what? Peace or victory. In Australia, this is an obscenity. So George Bush is smiling. He's giving this obscenity to all the Australians, and they start going, yeah, you, and they give it back to him. And then he says, oh, they love me, and he does it even more. It's in a trap. And on the front page of the Australian Times, it says, Bush insults nation. And it was a whole hoopla. And, we're laughing about it, but 3 people actually lost their jobs because of that aspect of it. So, again, it does vary by culture, and I just wanted you to be aware of that in those areas. So think about that aspect of it. Now, where did I put everything? Oh, there it is, the clicker. So, any questions on that, by the way? I just want to make sure we got that. Okay, what I'd like to do right now is because I want to do one more thing, and then I got to give you a break, because the ideal time people can sit without a break is what? 50 minutes. And by the way, you should know this. You might want to write that down somewhere. Has anybody been to a meeting that just keeps going on and on and on? Anybody? Sort of like today, or me? I couldn't keep to my 50 minutes because of the way this is going, but I just want you to remember that, because for physiological reasons, you got to go to the bathroom, got to do psychological reasons, I got to pick up my cell phone, I got to check messages, all that stuff. But I do want to give you one thing, because when we talked about these right here too, words and language also do count. I just want to give you these real quickly. What's the number? According to the USA Today, 47% of Americans said the word they hate the most is what? No. Pardon? I? No. No. No? Like? Does anybody read the USA Today? Okay. Stop? So, okay, they said the word they hated the most was that. Whatever. Whatever is a dismissive term, so just take that out of your vocabulary right now. Another word I would watch out for, and a lot of the places I work for give fines if you use this word. It's called no problem. What happens when you say no problem? People think of what? There was a problem. So a lot of these places I've done work, Disney World, Hyatt hotels and stuff, they fine people if you use that. Instead of saying, so if you say, could you do that? Don't say no problem, say what? It's a pleasure, I'd be happy to. Just get that out of your category. Some other words, just the wide slang and profanity. I'm not going to give any examples on that. I'll get in trouble. So, euphemism. What's a euphemism? It's a nice way of saying something. So, for example, if the government says we're having revenue enhancement, what does that mean? Your taxes are going up. Isn't that nice? Or in the war, they said there's collateral damage. What does that mean? People are getting killed all around. So, and then once people find out what you really need, they start getting upset at you. Another couple things, labels, such as that's very unprofessional. When you tell somebody they're unprofessional, you got to say it's unprofessional because of this, this, and this. That's just going to get people madder. Vague words or acronyms. Anybody have any acronyms around here that you use a lot? Okay. For example, if I come today and I say, let me tell you about the XL4793, 10 minutes later, what are you still thinking about? What the heck is the XL4793? And you're not listening to a word I've said at that point on those areas. The other thing there is big words. I know all of us are smart here. We want to impress people. But then nobody knows what you're talking about. Good example of this. My wife I was talking to the other day, and I did not hear her for 20 minutes because she kept using this one word. She said, Arnold, that's very pugilistic. That's very pugilistic. It's very pugilistic. She kept going on with this pugilistic word. And after about 20 minutes, I said to her, Nancy, I don't mean to interrupt, but I have not heard one word you've said. And then, by the way, that's not a good thing to say to your wife. I learned that real quickly. But she said, well, why have you heard what I said? And I said, well, what the heck does pugilistic mean? You know how people look at you like you're an idiot because you don't know something? She said, pugilistic means warlike. And I said, well, why don't you just say warlike? You know, just make it simple for people on those areas. So, and then, of course, the 3 words you don't want to talk about at all, sex, politics, and religion, because everybody, you talk about something in politics, and guess what? Half the room's going to hate you right off the bat. So you just lost everybody's connection at that point. I'm going to keep moving over here. What we just did, we talked about how to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy when you were out there. We gave you the SOFTEN, S-O-F-T-E-N. And remember, if you don't do those things, people will focus on you and not the message you want to get across, and you're not as approachable, in other words. And then I wanted to give you, even though words were not a key part of that, I wanted to mention about some of these words to watch out for, and these are some things to take a look at. So one other thing I just wanted to point out here too was, I want to just give you a little acronym on how to say no. You ever wanted to say no to somebody but you're afraid of how it's going to come out? Anybody ever tried that? And it's just, you don't say it because it's going to come out the wrong way and everybody will hate you and all this stuff. So let's say, David is, let me just give an example. Let's say David's interrupting me at work. And I can do a few things. I can say, David, I'm busy right now. I can just give him the eye. I can walk away. And that's okay. It'll work. But guess what? I'm chipping away at the connection, at the relationship of working together. So what I might tell David, if he interrupts me at work, I might start like this. I understand this is important to you. By the way, what am I saying by understand? I'm listening. I'm empathizing with him. You're important, Debbie, in this case. Not David or Debbie, but you're important. However, David, here's the situation. I've got this report that's due out at 4:15 today. What am I doing here? I'm giving an explanation or a reason. People are complying much more when you give a reason for something to do than not giving a reason at all. So make sure you give a reason. And then I might say, David, I understand it's important to you. However, here's the situation. I've got this report that's due out at 4:15 today. Why don't we do this? And I call it, not coming through there. I call it action. We'll just get to that one in a second. I call it action. And so when I say action, so it's action or alternative. So why don't we meet tomorrow at 4:15? Why don't you get lost and see Stephen? No, don't say that. But there might be something else in there that you actually do. By the way, this is an art, not a science, too, because not everything works all the time. I always try these things on my own, going back to that, if I can get back to the USA, I try these things to see if they really work. And I was at my wife the other day asked me, she said, could you clean the garage? And I started off by saying, I understand you want me to clean the garage. So that was good so far. However, here's the situation. Then she looked me right in the eye and says, I don't care what the situation is, just clean the garage. I said, no, that's how it works. And she says, you're supposed to answer this way, so they don't follow along with the rules that I have. But anyway, you might want to think about that. I understand. By the way, you can use this in a meeting. You know how somebody's talking a lot and you want to stop them? You might want to say, I understand you want to talk right now. However, here's the situation. We've got to be out of here by lunchtime. Why don't I meet and talk to you later about this? And we can meet after the meeting. So you can use it in a lot of different ways. But when we talk about words, this comes up a lot. How to say no in a nice way. Now, when we talk about no, sometimes we get misunderstandings. And has anybody here ever been misunderstood? Actually, there's about 600 words in the English language with about 10 or more meanings, believe it or not. And I saw this the other day. Did you know 10% of Americans think Joan of Arc was Noah's wife? Does anybody know that? Anyway, I got the 10% in here. I think he was. Anyway, but but when we talk about misunderstandings, they cause people to become irate, lose respect, lose trust, lose cooperation, and derail relationships. And what I'd like to do is I want to do a little exercise to show you, to give you something on how to avoid misunderstandings with people. So on page, what is it? 7. Just turn to page 7 really quickly in your handout. Turn to page 7. Everybody got that? Okay, what I'd like you to do on page 7 is right now, just put your pens down. Everybody put your pens down. Everybody got? No, don't write a thing. Put your pens down, okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a list of 12 words. And when I finish, I want you to write them down in the order that I said, or as close as you can get. Everybody got that? I'm going to go really slow, and especially at 3 in the afternoon, this goes really easy, right? No, but here it is. Here's the words, so don't write a thing down and just listen, and as soon as I finish, write them down. The first word is night. The second word is rest. The third word is quiet. The fourth word is slumber. The fifth word is deep. The sixth word is NyQuil. The seventh word is snooze. The eighth word is restful. The ninth word is snore. The 10th word is sound. The 11th word is tranquil. And the last word is awake. So write those down in the order I said, as close as you can get. Okay, let me ask you a few questions while you're writing those down. What was the first word on your list? Night. Night. How many of you got that by a show of hands? Okay, almost everybody got that. So when you're trying to give directions to people, you want them to get something done, what's the point behind this? The first thing you say, people are going to remember. Because what do we say? The attention span's about 8 seconds. So how many of you, again, listen, somebody says, you tune out, you tune in, you tune out. So you really want to get your point across right away. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's the thing I want to make sure you get. Here's the point. Don't go, it's like a speech. You know, like a lot of times people do presentations, say, hi, I'm Arnold Sanow, I did this, this, and this. You're wasting valuable time with that. Just get right into it, and that's what people remember right off. Let me ask you another question. How many of you had NyQuil on your list? Okay, about 90% of you got that. Why did we get that? That's sort of in the middle of a conversation. Brand recognition, what else? It's what? It's related to sleep? Okay. Anything else? Okay, here's the point I want to make. About 60% of the American public is very visual. So what you need to do is you need to create pictures in their mind. So I always recommend people tell a story or example or an exercise, something that they remember a lot longer. So when you create a picture, they remember. For example, how many of you have ever seen a PowerPoint slide with 1 million words on it? Anybody like that? And what do you tend to do? You know, you just look for your cell phone really quickly and try to do something else. You don't pay attention to it at all. Or you know how somebody speaks very intellectually, but not emotionally. So you need, a lot of people, you need to create that story or example. You know how I've been trying to model that a little today by saying, okay, my wife, an example, or this is an example. And I'm trying to, you can think of that because you can picture it versus just saying the words, don't do this or do that. Okay, let me ask you another question. How many of you had awake on your list just by a show of hands? Okay, about 90% of you got that. Why did we get that? Last thing you said. So here's what you want to do to make sure you have no misunderstandings. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them. Tell them what you told them again. People need to hear things about 3 or 4 times. Or paraphrase at the end. And I'll do this. A lot of times when I'm trying to make sure something comes across, I'll say, Stephen, I just want to make sure I was clear. Don't put it on the other person that they didn't get it. Just want to make sure I was clear. Here's the 2 things I really wanted to make sure happened. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have time for that. Has anybody ever done a project and somebody said that 3 weeks later said you were doing the wrong thing? Anybody ever had that happen? Or you didn't do it because we didn't ask enough questions in those things. So when we see this, awake. Also, when you talk to somebody, like when I say now, like today, when I say now, in conclusion, what's everybody going to do? They're, oh, it's almost over. I'll listen now. You know, so they'll listen to what you're finally saying because it's over almost. I can go home. So anyway, and let me ask you another question. Raise your hand high if you had this one. How many had sleep on your list? Okay, keep your hands up high if you had sleep. Okay, about half of you had sleep. I did not say the word sleep. I did not say it. I did not say it at all. But a lot of you got it. So what's the point behind that? Misunderstanding. Or you were asleep, maybe, I don't know. I gotta eat more of that candy. Come on now. What's the point behind that?
So you're making connections based on the front and the first and the last word, and you're sort of connecting the dots yourself.
Yeah, did everybody hear what he just said? You're making the exception, you're connecting the dots. And how many times have you told somebody something, said, I told you that? No, you didn't. Yes, you did. No, you did. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. You swore you told them, but they're connecting it into another way. So we want to make sure people walk away with the message we said and not something else. So what did we say before? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them to make sure, and paraphrase afterwards. Now, a lot of times when we're talking to people, we get misunderstood because a lot of times when we do email, we don't have any of our body language, right? Has anybody ever, one word in an email can make a big difference? Anybody ever had that problem before here? You know, and somebody has a whole misunderstanding because of the word you use in the email. And just to give you an example of that, I have some signs up here I want to show you. And you tell me what this means. Here's a sign, first one I'm going to give you. Coming into Washington, D.C., this sign was up for 2 years. And you tell me what that means. It said, welcome to Washington, D.C., a work-free drug place. Now, what does that mean? You work free and get drugs? I don't know. Is that part of it? What did they screw up here? It should have been a drug-free work. You know, one word. So watch out when you're writing things nowadays. You know, when we talk about these misunderstandings too, here was one for a car dealer. This one was for a car dealer and said, if I can get this thing to work here, why go anywhere and get cheated when you can come here? By the way, do not use that as a motto for your company. Do not use that. Some of you are writing that down. No, don't write that down. Don't use it. Another one is this one for handicap parking, falling rocks. You know, if you write in the right place there. Here's another one for a store. It said, let me get this. Sorry, we're open. You know, what does that mean on that case? Here's one to get rid of your kids. If I can get this one. I'm having trouble with this thing here. Oh, let's see. Soccer not allowed. Soccer may only be played in the archery range. Here's one for the wall of China. Toilet? Okay. I don't know where that. I don't want to go to that one, actually. I skipped that one. Here's one for a church. Why am I getting this? Okay, let's see. The church goes, don't let worries kill you, let the church help. You know, another one, I mean, what do all these mean? Come on, you got to watch out what they're saying. You know, another good example of this, too, is I do speak at a lot of conventions, too, and I go all over the country and overseas a lot of times, and I'll do a speech. And I was in Las Vegas a few years ago, and I was speaking to the Ski Industries Association, and it was pretty nice because they had my name on a sign. It said, welcome Arnold Sanow, and it was in Las Vegas. And in Las Vegas, they played dice. And what's the name for dice? Craps. They call dice craps. That's just the name that they call dice when you play dice. And I saw this sign said, welcome Arnold Sanow. I thought this is pretty cool, but then it said something else too. If I can get around to this, if you can see the sign, if I can get it in there, where is it? See where it says, welcome Arnold Sanow on the right, Ski Industries of America? So guess what was underneath that? If you can look at this right now, craps in the lounge all night. And I was trying to get people to say, well, what's the point behind this? And in the last work group I did, I said, well, what's the point? Somebody looks at me and says, the point is you have a problem. So I said, that's not the point. Okay, so get it? It's not the point. By the way, if you have kids running around, probably a lot of you have seen this. I see this in stores all the time. Unattended children will get an espresso and a free kitty. So that'll keep them moving. Okay, well, moving on from there. So remember, paraphrase what you're going to say. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them was the key way to make sure you don't have those. And be very careful. Does anybody have that problem? Ever send something by email and it's the wrong word and people read it totally wrong? That's happened to a few of you here. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay, the next thing I want to make sure we do is on page, what page is this? Page 8. If you look at page 8, I want to do a little exercise on I'm just going to read this up here. I hate reading slides, but to understand and get along with others, you need to communicate the grades that others find is important and not just what you find is important. So if you want to build rapport, relationships, and connect with people, we have to deal with others. Because you ever heard that saying, treat people the way you want to be treated? Anybody ever heard that before? That's not really true. What's the true part of that? You should treat people the what? The way they want to be treated. And everybody comes across in different ways. So what I'd like you to do now is I'm going to give you a little exercise. I'd like you to circle the letters next to the words that best describe you at work at least 80% of the time. So if you're enthusiastic at work 80% of the time, circle the P. If you're demeaning 80% of the time at the work, circle the D. And by the way, it's not one column against the other. So go down each column and circle as many of these as you see that you think you are 80% of the time. Okay. When you finish, add up your A's, your T's, your P's, and your D's. But there's 4 styles. And when we talk about 4 styles that you have, it's important what your style is, but for the purpose of this class, we're talking about customer service and customer relations and stuff like that. I'm going to ask you, how do you deal with somebody like this? And by the way, they said if you had 6 or more in any one category, you're a little bit of all these things. You're a little bit of that category. However, everybody, when you do these tests, we're all a little bit of what? Everybody's a little bit of all these things. But when you run into somebody, you want to tell what they are right away, because you need to approach them in that way to build rapport and relationships and connect, because everybody's different. And if you don't do that, you're going to miss the boat about 70% of the time. So what I want to start off with is, how many people had 6 or more in any one category? How many had 6 or more in any 2 categories? 6 or more in any 3 categories? Okay, all the multi-personality people are back there. Yeah, 6 or more in any 4. Okay, I'll tell you what that means later. I don't want to embarrass you yet, but anyway. But here's what it is. So I'm going to start off with the first one, and I'm going to go over verbal and vocal behavior, nonverbal recognition weaknesses, and then I want you to think of somebody you might know like this, and I'm going to ask you, how do I need to talk to them to build rapport, relationships, and connect? So let me start with the first one. How many people had 6 or more in the P's? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. How'd you get 16? There's only 12. Okay. That's it. So what do you think the P's are? What would be a name for the P's? P's would be personable. That's not it though. Passionate. P's are promoters. So for your information, the P's are promoters. And let me give you I'm going to start off with the verbal and vocal behavior Z's, and then I want you to tell me, how would I need to speak to them specifically to get them to connect with me? And here's what they say about them. They speak quickly and respond quickly, tend to be verbose and descriptive rather than economical use of language. They use, that means they talk a lot, by the way. They use stories and anecdotes, they use vocal variety, and their tone is generally optimistic. Does anybody know anybody like that? Okay, if you know somebody like that, tell me how I would need to speak to them to connect with them. And this might be different than your own style. How would I?
Detailed and open.
Pardon?
Detailed and open.
Not necessarily detailed. Open though. Open would be key. Pardon? Pardon? I'm sorry, I can't. Listen to them. That would be good. Open would be good.
Match their energy.
Pardon? Match their energy. Yeah, these people are going to be pretty high energy. They're going to just want to keep going. Remember I said the attention span of an adult was 8 seconds? These guys are like 2 seconds. They're bored as soon as I walk to the room. Anyway, but I didn't have to say a word yet. They're out of here. But, okay, but what else? Anything else? Anybody know anybody like this? How would I need to speak to them to hear me? Very what? Pardon? I'm a little bit of that type, yeah.
Talk in broad strokes rather than details to connect to them.
Did you hear what he says? Yeah, you have to talk in broad strokes versus details they get bored with quickly. So, and it says here use stories and anecdotes because, by the way, these people are very visual too. So if you know somebody like this, you have to use stories and anecdotes. And by the way, never just show a slide with 1,000,000 words on it. It's over in 5 seconds. Keep the vocabulary and tone optimistic too. They don't want to hear like, oh, I got to go to this stupid seminar or something. They need to be optimistic when you talk about that. Okay, let me get the nonverbal behaviors. These are still promoters. Think of somebody you know. They are informal, friendly, stimulating, are political creatures. They deal well with people and thoroughly enjoy the contact. They throw themselves into it, are dynamic, energetic, enthusiastic, even charismatic. They lean forward when speaking, engage in direct eye contact, use facial expressions liberally, gesture reinforce ideas, and have a relaxed posture. So if you're walking into a room and you want to make you know what we say, people make up their minds about you immediately? If you know somebody like this, do you want to walk into a room like this and go like, or more like what? Hey, what's up? What's going on today? What are you doing? Hey, and get into the small talk, engage, don't get to business right away. These people will not, they'll be turned off by you in that case. Also, what do you want to do with your hands too? When you talk about your, what do you want to do with your hands when you're talking to somebody like this? Pardon? Yeah, gestures are important. So for example, if I have somebody like this, I really got to make sure if I'm talking, I had a group of salespeople the other day I was working with, and these were high promoters. By the way, each slide I had was just a picture, because they'd be bored by a word. So and I knew this when I was talking to them right away. They just want to have a good time. They didn't care about anything we're going to talk about. But when I talked to them, I would say it is a square. And you know what I do? I would draw it, because it's the picture that creates in their mind. The word they lose, the picture they draw. So they're very visual in that case. Recognition profile. These are still promoters. They are well-liked, positive thinking, present big picture terms like contact with people, feel bored and constrained by the routine, excited by unstructured situations, do not enjoy working in isolation, they are impulsive and emotional, they are never bland, and enjoy recognition and being noticed. So if you had an employee like this, what do you need to do all the time? Pat them on the head, and you tell them how great they are. So we would go like here, you know, if somebody's my employee right here, said, you know what? And here's the trouble with these guys. They need recognition so much. I said, you know what? You did a great, I come in Monday morning. You did a great job last week. You're great today. Everything you do is fantastic. And 3 hours later, guess what he's going to say? God, I don't get any recognition around here. They need so much. It's unbelievable. So you got to go crazy on this. And weaknesses. What might be a weakness of one of these people?
Less detail-oriented.
Less detail-oriented. So, and you're right. It says, while focusing on the big picture, they tend to miss, even avoid the details. They view deadlines and step-by-step, day-by-day instructions as boring and challenging. They see visions. They believe an important part of encounter is social lubrication and sometimes emphasizing the point of annoyance for others. So again, it's Monday morning, and I'm sorry, Kevin? Let's say, you ever done this? You're sitting at your desk, and somebody comes in the morning, you're trying to do some work, and it's Monday morning. Hey, Kevin, how was your weekend? And before he can say anything, hey, let me tell you about mine. You know, I got up and I took my son to soccer practice, and let me tell you about the play-by-play action, and then we did this and this and this, and he's going, oh, God, you know, how do I get out of this thing? But that's their personality to want to do that. And by the way, what did we learn today that you can actually do to get rid of them real quickly? USA. Now, I understand you want to talk. However, here's the situation. I got this report out due, and by the way, let's say it's 9 o'clock. I got this report due at 9:02. Don't get any more than 2 minutes. And I got this 9:02. And then here's what we're going to do later. And so again, so don't get bogged down in details. Show the big picture and stuff like that. By the way, one thing I found on teams with these people, they tend to be the motivators of the workplace. They come into work at 9 in the morning, at 7 in the morning, and say, man, it's a great day, let's get going. And the rest of you are like, get a life. You know, you can't say anything. Anybody know anybody like that? It's just like, they're just too enthusiastic for you. The other thing when I talk about these people too, they tend to come to workshops like this, and they don't care if they learn one darn thing. As long as we're having a good time, that's top priority. So if I give too much stuff, that's terrible. So we don't want to get into that. And by the way, my statistics have shown that if any company has more than 5% of these types of people, your chances for success are pretty slim. I just made that up, by the way. Don't worry, that's totally made up. I just want to see the reaction on some of your faces. But there's no valid science to that at all, so forget that. Okay, let me get to the next one. By the way, what would happen if you had a team of these people together? What would get done?
Nothing.
But they'll have a good time doing nothing. I want to tell you that, so I just want to make sure you know that. Yeah, exactly. So you're there. Okay, so let me give you the next one. How many people had 6 or more in the D's? 6 or more in the D's. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, marked everything. 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, what do you think the D's are? D's are sort of the opposite of this one. D's are aggressive. That's right, but it starts with an A though.
Demoter.
Demoter. Demoter. Demoter. Somebody's a dictator over here, not a dictator. What? Distractors. Okay, let me tell you what they said here. These are directors. By the way, you can have somebody working for you as a director. It doesn't matter where that is. But let me give you the verbal vocal behavior. These, and think if you know anybody like this. It could be a customer you have too. Think of customers doing it. They speak quickly and take direct action. They will take risks. They use forceful direct language and specialize in facts, data, and statistics. They are bottom line. Their voices are usually controlled, measured, and more monotone. Anybody know anybody like that? Customer, somebody, okay, some of you know people like that. How would I need to speak to them to get their respect, to get their connection with them? Stern, to the point, don't go off on the tangents, prevent facts, data, and statistics, get to the bottom line. And by the way, people say, well, how do I know what somebody is without taking a test? Well, a good example of this, I knew this guy was a director immediately. I was doing a contract with the Marine Corps, and I walked into this general's office, and I never met him in my life, but I had a project due for him, and this is all I did. I went right up to the general, and I said this. I said, good morning, General. I'm Arnold Sanow. I want to give you the project. He said, forget the good morning. Just give me the project. I said, okay. That means don't talk about me. And I had to adapt really quickly. Here's it is. No, sir. Yes, sir. And he went right into everything at that point. So again, I didn't need to give him a test. I figured it out in that case right there. By the way, when you look at the difference between a director and a promoter, just to give you why you have to act differently in certain cases, remember I gave you that little acronym, SOF? T-E-N, and I asked you, what's the S? What's the S? What's the S? The other day I was working with a bunch of promoters, they're all salespeople, and I said, what's the S? And they didn't get it. What's the S? They didn't get it. Meanwhile, I gotta get moving here because I gotta finish this thing. They didn't get it, like for 10 minutes, and finally, guess what I said to everybody? I said, let me tell you what the S is. And guess what they all said? Oh no, don't tell us, we want to guess. Because to them, it's the fun is in the what? The game, it's not what the answer is. So immediately, finally somebody got the S after about 15, it took them 15 minutes to get smile, unbelievable. But I knew this was going to end up. And then finally we go down and I get to the T. Remember how the T, nobody gets the T, it was territory? And I said, what's the T? Nobody got it. So I looked way in the back of the room like where Yvonne was, way back there, and everybody's sort of laughing on something. Excellent! Territory! I just made it up that she said it. You know? So that I could get moving on here, because I had to move. And everybody's looking at her and said, okay, let's get to the E, you know, let's move on. So I just had to move this thing going. And here's the difference. If I go to directors and I say, what's the S? What's the first thing a director's going to say after one guess? Just tell us the stupid thing already. Couldn't we just give us on a handout? We don't need to sit in this class. Just give us on a handout. We can read it. We don't have to go through it, okay? And that's the director. So the difference is when you're working with different people, you got to adjust in those areas. If you have a group of all people, you do what? You maybe do one guess and then move on because you have to cover the directors and the promoters. Anyway, let's move on from the directors. Nonverbal behavior. They are more formal, competitive, business-like, and take charge. They like control. They deal simply but directly with people. However, in a crisis, they would act harshly if they be and let the chips fall where they may. They lean forward to make a point and engage in direct eye contact. Body's rigid, formal. Facial expression, body moves are controlled. So if I come into a director's office and I want to make a good impression, do I walk in like this, say, what's up? Or more like what? Like this, I put my hand out, I shake it hard. Remember I said eye contact 3 to 5 seconds? I just stare at the guy, you know, I just keep, I do not let anything, because they'll still think you're weak if you're not like that. So be aware of those things. Profile, they are feared by some and respected by others, recognize the ability to get things done, they react swiftly, take direct action, let's get on with it is their motto. They need control action, insist upon results, they are risk takers. Bureaucracies are in a way they will find a way under, over, around, and through to get results. So if you have one of your customers, for example, that you have a project due or something you're giving them, how do you want to, talk to them in a way? You want to do what? Show them how it can get done. You want to show up. You want to show. Talk the results. Don't just talk about theories in that case. And what might be the weakness of a director? Think of somebody you know like this. What could be a weakness? Pardon? Not seeing the big picture. And actually, you're right. And also. If pushed, they will say the hard thing, even if feelings are hurt. They are extremely competitive and focus on the immediate problem and lose sight of the big picture. And by the way, you got to watch out for that, because I didn't mention this earlier, but I get hired by a lot of companies to work with people who are technically great, but they have high turnover, nobody wants to work with them, all these other kinds of things, and we work on these issues, and sometimes it's the way you say it. You can say things that just turn off people right away, even though you're great at your job. So you got to watch for that. Okay, third thing, how many people had 6 or more in the T's? 7, 8, 9, I thought there'd be like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Do you have 20? There isn't 20. Anyway, you guys got a lot. So what do you think the T's are? By the way, if you're a T, you should know this in advance. Technical? Thinker. Who said thinker? Give yourself another one then. Put down and get an A. Were you a thinker? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So thinkers know everything I'm saying in advance, so that's the key. Let me give you the verbal and vocal behavior of these people and see if you know anybody like this. They speak slowly and deliberately, language is careful, statements are fewer, speak in monotone, and focus on data, facts, and especially details. Anybody know anybody like that? So how do I deal with somebody like that? Make sure you do what?
Information.
I'm sorry.
So give them information.
Give them information, and the right information too. By the way, what happens if you give them something and there's a mistake in it? What happens to your credibility?
Shot.
Let me test you here. Let's say you got a resume from somebody and there were like 3 mistakes on it. How many of you would not hire that person? Okay, by the way, don't look at my handout. I'll never get back here again. Just don't look at mine. Okay. But that's the test of a true thinker. So, and a promoter won't even look at the resume anyway, so they miss it. So present the data, facts, statistics, and be direct on those aspects of it. By the way, what would happen if you had a team of these people together? What would get done? Nothing, and they're not going to have a good time doing nothing. So, like the promoters. Let me give you the nonverbal behaviors. They do not particularly enjoy dealing with people. Facts and data are certain. People are not. Life would be better if I didn't have to deal with all those people. So how do you connect with them? Email, right. And when you email them, guess what you're going to get back from them? Corrections on your email. They're going to correct you on all the things that you did. So I'll make sure you don't do that. Thinkers also, and here's something you got to watch out for, because I get people complaining to me about this. They are sometimes perceived as negative people because they are always asking questions or setting up hypothetical roadblocks. This is just their attempt to get all the facts and deal with all the possible scenarios so they can put together the best program. They are slow decision makers because they are cautious, organized, precise, and detailed oriented. And it's interesting because a lot of people I work with, when I work with teams a lot of times, I'll be asking people about others, and they'll say, that person's very negative. That person's negative. I say, well, what do you mean by negative? And you know what the negative is? Just because they're a different what? Different style. You know, it's like you ever have a meeting and somebody's asking a million questions and you just want to go to lunch? Anybody ever done anything like that? And there's nothing wrong with that person, but it's just the way they work together. And what might be the weakness of a thinker?
Think too much.
Pardon?
Think too much.
Think too much, don't make a decision. You both are right. It says they are indecisive and sometimes suffer from analysis paralysis. So it's getting things. So how do you get somebody like this to get something done? Pardon? Give them options and give them a what?
No options.
No options, okay. Sometimes 2 options work, but also make sure you have your facts and your detail. Everything's got to be right on target, and give them a time limit too. We got to have this by 3 o'clock today. Okay, so make that happen. And then the last thing is how many people had 6 or more on the A's? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, A's are what? Analytical? Close. A's are accommodators. A's are accommodators for your information. And let me give you the verbal and vocal behavior of these people. They speak slowly and are generally unhurried in their reactions. They are great listeners, and their language is supportive and non-controversial. They use vocal variety and present stories, examples, and anecdotes. So if I have somebody who's just easygoing, how do I want to communicate with them? Very what? Pardon? Laid back, non-controversial, non-inflammatory. I mean, you never want to go to somebody like this. I don't think you want to go to anybody like this, but you wouldn't want to start off by saying, you know what? I think we're having layoffs around here. Don't do anything. Don't do that. Don't do it. But that would give them a real heart attack. So make sure you don't do that. Non-inflammatory language. Nonverbal behavior. They truly enjoy people, but sometimes are shy. At meetings, often don't speak out. Give indirect eye contact. Lean back and not gesture very much, but appear relaxed. So in your meeting, or even if you're talking to a customer or a client, and they're just sort of sitting back and not saying anything, what's your first reaction? They don't care. They're bored. They're not buying. But I want you to take a different look at this, because not a lot of people jump out and say things all the time. I mean, I could get into introverts and extroverts. There's a whole story on that too. But they're not just jumping up at a meeting and saying things, but actually sometimes these people are listening a lot more than anybody in the room. So just be aware of that. And don't jump to conclusions on that one. So let's see. They true and where am I on this? Okay. Profile. They have a high need for a cooperative environment, dislike conflict. The most loyal people in the organization generally know the environment, like the parameters they have. They have a need for relationships, strongly supportive team players. So you want to make even your customers feel like we're in a team part. You want to make sure everybody's part of the team. They need to be involved. And what might be the weaknesses of these people? They may not change because change is too discomforting. The status quo is safe. So how do you make change with somebody like this? Get them involved. I'm sorry, somebody said it. Also show them how this is important for them, how it's functional for survival is all the key. So what we're going to do is, the reason I went over this, the so what, is again, it goes back to this. If you want to build rapport, relationships, and connect with others, you've got to communicate the ingredients that others find is important. And I'm going to give you, you're going to get this sheet later that tells you what they are and how to deal with them on each part of it. So you'll have this in your repertoire, and you can carry this around to make sure you're right when you talk to that, and how you pick up what somebody is at that point. Any questions on that one at all? So, yeah.
How do you deal with people that are multiples?
He says, how do you deal with people who are multiples? Now, by the way, some people say they're multiples, which a lot of times, if you had that in your category, a lot of times you're probably taking this test on how you're already dealing with people. So you may say, because a lot of times when I see people who have multiple things on this, okay, I would change to react. I would deal differently with this person as I would this. So and I'm saying in your subconscious, maybe that's how you were taking it in that case. And also, when you say multiples, a lot of times when I do a team build, I don't have time today, but a lot of times I have people do this on each other. Because sometimes people are a little delusional about what they are, so I don't need to say that word. I don't need to say you're delusional, but sometimes you are. So I actually have people do this, and you might want to do this as an exercise sometime with a team building thing, and say, okay, let's do it on each other, and you'll be shocked sometimes at the way you are. You know, it's just like when I have my employees, do you guys do 360-degree feedback here, where you have like, everybody knows what that means, is where everybody evaluates each other. And when I started doing that with my employees a number of years ago, I would sit there and on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, 1 is what, low, 5 is high. What do we all think we are? 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. My employees would sit down and give me a 1, 1, 1. So there's something in our delusion here about 1 to 5. So, you know, where am I doing wrong? And you can't, you know, that's the way, I can't say they're wrong because that's the way they feel. You can't tell people they're wrong in that way, but you look at the way that comes across. So this is an important thing, and I'll get that to you later for you. And then finally, what I want to do is I want to give you that last thing right there, which is the 6 ways to get everyone singing your praises. And when we talk about that, there's 6 keys. Is that in your handout somewhere? Yeah. Okay, and here's the first one. These are the things that you want to do on a constant basis to get people to love you, to like you, to want to deal with you, to work with you, whether they're customers, internal, external. The first one there is attitude. And everything begins and ends with attitude. I don't mean to be fluffy here, but I think I mentioned about Hyatt hotels a long time ago. You have to smile at least 5 times within a 5-minute interview. Did I mention that? Maybe I didn't mention that. But yeah, at that, or Disney World, they actually have people. Did you know Disney World, they actually have people that go around during the day, and if they see you in a bad mood that day, they don't fire you, but they take you off for the day, because what happens when you're in a bad mood? You start treating everybody wrong, you don't talk to people well. For example, how many of you think some of your clients are pests? Anybody have clients who are pests or customers who are pests? And what happens when you think somebody's a pest? Oh, here's that pest on the phone again. What do you start to do? You start to talk to them like your voice and your tone come out in that area, so you got to watch it. Now, by the way, when I talk about attitude, I want to give you this story. Some of you may have heard this, but it's the only thing I can think about. And is everybody here familiar with monasteries where men go and they can't speak? Anybody know what I'm talking about? You got to be very quiet in a monastery. Well, there's a young monk who went to a monastery. He'd been there for 2 full years. And during that time, he said absolutely nothing, because you're not allowed to talk for 2 years. It's got to be very quiet. But after 2 years, you get to say 2 words. So the chief monk comes up to him, he says, you've got, it's your anniversary, you haven't talked for 2 years, you can say 2 words. And his first 2 words were, food, terrible. That's it, that's all he said after 2 years. So now he's in this monastery for 4 full years. All he said is food, terrible. And the chief monk says, hey, it's another 2 years. You said food, terrible once. What's your next one? He says, bed, lumpy. That's it after 4 years. Now he's in this monastery for 6 full years. And all he said is food, terrible, and bed, lumpy. And the chief monk says, you can say 2 more words. And his 2 words after 6 years was, I quit. And the chief monk says, well, it doesn't surprise me one bit. All you've done since you've been here is complain and complain and complain. And the moral of this story is, how many of you, just by a show of hands, see the best side of anything no matter what happens? Just by a show of hands. Let's see those hands go up. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, how many of you know somebody who sees the best side of anything no matter what? Anybody know anything like that? It's sort of like the kid who's in the bottom half of his class. And somebody says, geez, I'm sorry to see you in the bottom half. And he says, well, without me, there wouldn't be a top half. You know, it's how you see things, right? Or it's like the guy who was divorced. Somebody says, I'm sorry to see you're divorced. And he says, I wasn't divorced, I was traded. You know, type of stuff. I don't think you're buying that. All right, anyway, moving on. But to help you keep your attitude in good shape, a couple things I would mention. There's a little thing you can do, and I did this for Washington National Dulles Airports. I had a full-year contract with them years and years ago, and we gave everybody a little black book. And in there, they'd have to write the flip side. So this is called the flip side exercise. And so when something went wrong, what's the flip side? So for example, if you hated your job, what's the flip side of that? At least I got a job, right? Let's say you put a dent in your new car. What's the flip side of that? I'm not dead. Okay, or let's say you get caught in traffic. That's pretty bad. What's the flip side of that? At least I'm not the person who's the accident right up there too sometimes, so we can complain about these things. Here's another one that might get you. Let's say your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, they sort of just took off on you. That could be pretty devastating. What's the flip side of that? Peace and quiet. Or closet space. Anyway, I think we're missing the point on that one. Yeah, okay, forget it. I'm skipping that one. But it's interesting because a number of years ago, just to put this in perspective, I spoke at another meeting and what's his name? Christopher Reeves. Anybody remember him? Superman. Remember he was, what was he? He was fell off a horse and he was paralyzed. And he was just sitting there and he did his speech and they had to move him like this. And he said this: "I would trade places with any one of you for any of your so-called problems. Does anybody want to take me up on it?" And you couldn't hear a pin drop. And you know what? You have no problems. Remember I said that before? What am I grateful for at this moment? Because when you think about it, I mean, you've got it made in the shade. So think about some of those things. So the first thing there is keep your attitude adjusted at all times, because that really makes a difference. Second thing is be reliable. And reliable means in your business what? Nobody's reliable here? Do what you say you're going to do it when you say you're going to do it right the first time. I know you guys maybe can't guarantee things, but a long time ago I was working with the Kona garbage company out in Hawaii, and this is what they said on the side. Listen to this guarantee. It says, "We guarantee complete satisfaction or double your garbage back." How do you like that? Don't take that one either. But the third thing is to be responsive, and responsive means being what? Accessible, available, willing to help when any time. Go beyond what's expected. Help others in other areas when we talk about being responsive. Fourth thing is be credible. And when I talk about credible, do you or do your employees express trust and confidence? A lot of times before I do a session with some companies I work with, I do mystery shopping. Anybody familiar with that? And I'll pretend I'm a customer and I'll go through the processes. And this is one of the things, like I'll call people sometimes and they don't really know what they're talking. If you're going into a computer store to buy something and you know more than the guy selling it, maybe you don't talk about it. That gives you a lot of confidence, doesn't it? So, or they tell you the wrong thing and it's like, oh God, forget it. So you may want to try that sometimes. I don't know if you guys do that, but calling people sometimes around here, just asking questions, seeing what's coming up. The next thing is to be appearance. And the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. What does everybody do? They judge a book by its cover. And by the way, the old days too, it used to be, I used to go everywhere in a suit and tie, and then I found out when I, recently I was doing something with the Outdoor Recreation Association. These are people, REIL, being, all the type of things, and I was about to go in to the meeting, and I was walking in with a suit and tie on, and I was about to go in the door, and the person who hired me pulled me by the collar and said, "You can't go in looking like that." I said, "What do you mean? Look at your audience." And I looked at the audience, and they're all in T-shirts, cut-off jeans, all these different things going on. And they say, "You go in there," and they're going to say, "Oh, geez, it's another tie, a boring tie." And you know how you get panicky all of a sudden? So immediately I took off my suit coat. I was about to put holes in my pants. And then I said, "You know what? I'm not going that far." But there's a point you got to watch out, because people make impressions these days, and it's not necessarily just suit and ties anymore. So be aware of that on where you go. I did some work for Microsoft a long time ago, and there you never, ever wear a suit and tie. So just be honest about that. And then the last thing is empathy. And to the extent that you treat someone as special and solve his or her unique needs, they'll continue to work with you, they'll continue to deal with you, and they'll continue to come back. It's putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So, in conclusion, look at that. In conclusion, I want a couple of things we wanted to do today. This was on building rapport, relationships, and connections. I wanted to give you a few things to do. And I am leaving you, I'm giving this to Yvonne later, I have 5 books available. If you want to get them later, we can get some of those. I also have the cliff notes of those. I'm going to give her about 10 copies of these. These little cards and stuff that you keep in your wallet, and it's one thing at a time. And what I would suggest, at your next meeting, you give a card to one person, like 3 ways to develop relationships, and they have to teach it. Because what happens when you teach something, you do what? You learn it. So I always have people teach the thing, and it scares them to death, but they'll know it after they learn the thing. I also have a presentation skills book, which I'm going to leave with you too. The newsletter, if you want, it's probably passing around here somewhere, the sign up if you like this stuff, but it'll keep you reminded of this. And then we're doing a video, which you'll get you can keep looking at if you want to look at this thing later as we move on. So I want to give you a few of those types of things to take a look at. And then I also suggest you get an accountability partner here. You know that last page there with the light bulb? You may want to write down what am I going to do. Maybe connect with somebody else and say, hey, 30 days later, let's get back together and see if I actually did some of these things that you're going to do. Actually, if I had more time, I'd have you go around the room and tell me what you're going to do, but I can't do that right now. So I found out, really, when you boil this down to it, the best people, and I'm ending with this quote here from Mahatma Gandhi. He said, The best people who get along tend to be nurturers, and I don't mean to be touchy-feely about this, but we have a number of constituencies. And when we talk about number of constituencies, we have our customers, we have our bosses, we have our subordinates, we have family and friends. And I put family and friends in a category there too, because if you're not happy at home, guess what? You're not going to be really happy at work in a lot of cases either. So all these things have to be together. And I want you to think about this thing, and I'm going to leave you with this quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who said this. He said, keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your actions. Keep your actions positive because your actions become your habits. Guard your habits and keep them, guard your habits and keep them positive because your habits become your value. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. And he ended up by saying that every day is a new beginning, and you must always remember that the nurtured seed always produces the abundant harvest. So I want to thank you for having me again, and I hope you have an abundant harvest. Thank you.